Welcome to another episode of the Biker PM. I'm your host, Anthony Pavelich. Today I have with me Najeeb. He is the founder of Council.club, a peer mentorship club for remote founders, freelancers, and entrepreneurs. He is one of the top 45 emerging innovators in North America and was seen on TEDx, Forbes, and Huffington. He sold his previous company and is the author of Fluid, How Culture, Hidden Opportunities, and Flatter Structures Lead to Profitable Innovation. In his pastime, he trains for triathlons. So let's get started. Hi, Najeeb. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm great. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So go ahead and give us a background about yourself and how you got started into your business, and then we'll take it all from there.
Sure. So my previous life, I used to be an architect here in Ontario, Canada. And the way I kind of went from being an architect to running a business over here was a very quick synopsis is that I studied architecture in my undergrad. I went to downtown Toronto, Ryerson, and while I was in university, I just wanted to start a business. So I started a business with 2 or 3 of my friends. We created a small architecture firm. We didn't really have licenses, but we were able to kind of still do drawings by hiring other people. And then that led into joining an architecture firm. And then after that, I basically spent a bit of time backpacking around South America, and I can kind of expand on that later. And part of the reason why I went there was I'm pretty sure you've seen the Motorcycle Diaries.
I have not watched it yet. I am going to, though. I know I've seen previews of it. It is one of those things that's on my list.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely on my list. And we'll talk about South America more in a minute, but yeah.
Yeah. So part of my reason going there was I wanted to, similar to Motorcycle Diaries, I wanted to kind of just buy a motorcycle in Bolivia and ride it up to Canada, right? So I kind of did a bit of stint in South America, and we can touch on that later. Came back here, went into the nonprofit side of things, and then I realized there was some pros and cons with that. That transitioned into a social enterprise and looking at how can I help a lot of people. And I realized for myself, business was the best vehicle to help and impact a lot of people. So I went into the e-commerce route to try and help a lot of people through my previous venture. And I sold that last year. And right now what I'm focused on is Council Club is a community for people who work remotely. So remote leaders and freelancers and solopreneurs.
Which is actually perfect for this podcast, which is when you reached out about what you had and I looked at your website, I'm like, this is a perfect topic and it's a perfect audience for it. Real quick, South America. I was actually supposed to go to Colombia at the end of April.
Okay.
That all got canceled.
This April?
Yes. My tickets, I was going to fly into Bogota and then spend a couple of days there and then go to Cartagena on the coast and Avianca first.
Yeah.
We were going to fly from Bogota to Cartagena, and Avianca was the first one to cancel that flight. Last night, I got an official notification of cancellation from Air Canada. So, with everything going on in the world, it's kind of I love going south. I mean, you said you wanted to go backpack South America. I think we went last year to Buenos Aires for the first time, and then over to Montevideo in Uruguay. Then we wanted to go to Colombia because we love going south. I go to the Caribbean a lot every year, at least once. Puerto Vallarta. So I'm taking Spanish, so I don't always have to rely on people to translate for me. But
yeah.
So did you get a motorcycle while you were down there, or did that not pan out?
Well, speaking of Spanish, by the way, so when I left for South America, so I used to be an architect here, right? And my mission was to kind of travel the world, like go to hikes and adventures. And my philosophy was, I really want to do that someday. But if I keep on saying someday, it'll never actually happen. And I just said, you know what? That's it. I have my license. I have my credentials. I have my experience. If anything, I can come back perhaps. So I just bought a one-way ticket to South America. And the only Spanish I knew was uno, dos, tres, what Pitbull says.
Yeah.
Right? So I didn't know anything. And the fantastic thing is once you spend time there, and if you're more diligent about it, then you can actually learn the language. Now, having said that, I wasn't an expert, but it was enough to kind of have a 2-hour conversation on a bus ride with a random Bolivian stranger sitting next to me.
Yeah.
Right. So, and obviously it's a bit of signs and, a bit of broken Spanish, Spanglish kind of thing. But yeah, that's just
It
fantastic
is.
over there. Yeah.
It's great to be able to have those kind of conversations with the locals.
Yeah, totally. And so my mission again was to kind of buy a motorcycle down there. Part of when I went and then ride it up to Canada. Unfortunately, or fortunately rather, what ended up happening was there was a earthquake devastated city in Peru. In 2007, there was an 8.0 magnitude earthquake. And what ended up happening was the city, it's kind of close to here. Imagine if it's someplace like Oshawa, right? So it's like close to the major hub, but it's not as populated. And that city was completely leveled. People did not know there was an earthquake that happened on the Friday night until Monday morning when employees went to their office saying like, hey, we are devastated right now with our family. So when I went there, I said, hey, I have an architecture background. Do you guys want any help? And they're like, yes, but we need a 2 weeks minimum commitment from you. I said, 2 weeks? I don't know if I could do it, but sure. And that 2 weeks became 2 months. And I was not only designing buildings and hospitals, but I also physically building it with my own hand, and which was incredible. So long story short, I spent a lot more time kind of helping out people over there that the buying a motorcycle did not happen. It kept on getting pushed. And there was a fellow volunteer from Vancouver or Victoria, I don't recall. He was actually thinking about doing the same. So he actually looked into buying a motorcycle in Bolivia. And at that time, or at least the way that he went about it, it was a lot of corruption and a lot of bureaucratic logistics that he could not get the paperwork for under a month, and two, get it out of the country without paying a lot of money. So for me, it didn't happen, but maybe it's a good thing.
Well, no, it sounds like your experience was much more fulfilling, I think, than maybe the motorcycle ride would have been. You got to experience a lot more than you would have on the motorcycle ride. Not that I'm putting down the motorcycle and I enjoy my Harley every day, every day I can. Not right now, obviously, but
yeah. Yeah, these days, like for me, I'm more focused on just taking it out on the road, but something that's not engine powered. I ride a lot, cycle, and I've been doing triathlons and doing a bit of few long distance roads. And yeah, I kind of miss the two wheels, when it's winter here at least.
Oh, definitely. So tell me a little bit more about your business. I've looked at the website. It's a great website. Like I said, it's great for the audience here. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about how it works and how you got that started.
Yeah, so I have been working from home for 8 years, even more than 8 years. And before that, or sorry, like nowadays it's called remote working, right? But back then there was no fancy term, right? What I realized was a lot of people who are working from home, they're isolated, just like myself, right? When you initially start working from home, it's fantastic, right? You enjoy the freedom, you can do things at your own time, etc. However, after some time, it gets a bit lonely and isolating. If you just work by yourself, and if you have like a business or if you're a freelancer, consultant, etc., you don't really also have a sounding board as well. So I'm like, well, look, there's a lot of these fantastic people with the wealth of resources. Why don't we just connect them? I started talking to a lot of people, and I found a few people who are at home. They're isolated, working at home remotely, and some of them actually went through depression and anxiety. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Let me try and figure out a way to kind of connect them. This started like 3 months ago in December. I just, after talking to a few people, understood like, hey, this is a need, and launched this. So initially it was launched under a different name, and then we just kind of rebranded as of in January. So yeah, that's how it came about. And the one thing that is somewhat different than right now compared to anywhere else is that a lot of people say that this is the biggest moment in time of having a remote work experiment. A lot of people are working remotely.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's actually different. Like I've been working from remotely for 8 years, this is far different than working remotely.
It is, because even though I work remotely, there are times, it's like I don't want to work at home, so I go pack up my stuff and sit at Starbucks and work.
Exactly.
I can't do that.
Exactly.
I mean, even though you're self-employed and you're working from home, it is different, even if you're used to it.
Yeah, and
because you're not out and about doing things. We could blend our lives better to where we could get out and, okay, I'm going to take a break, go to the grocery store and come back. Or I'm going to take a break, go get coffee, go do this.
or just meet friends, just
Yeah.
or to go to the gym. Now we can't. We're stuck at home. So this is, yes, in a way it is working remotely, but it is working remotely with one understanding, for lack of a better word, lockdown. But at the other mindset on the back of our head is we have like anxiety, we have panic, we're like, we don't know if we're going to have a job, a lot of people, right? So it's dramatically different. However, it is opening up people to remote work. However, it can also be a negative side, because that's what people's impressions of remote work might be.
Yeah, exactly. They might get that idea that, oh, I have to sit at home all day. I can't do anything else. And that's not how it would normally work. So it's different for us too than it is.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
So what do you want to do with this? Where do you want to take what you're working on with your business? Where do you want to take it?
Like what's the grand
your
vision?
Grand idea for it?
Yeah.
What's your grand vision?
So I'm kind of thinking the grand vision is a LinkedIn meets WeWork. Like what if people who are now working from home, like, I mean, one, we don't know what the short stint is with with this coronavirus, right? We can be here for a couple months, couple weeks, maybe a year, who knows? But it's no surprise that we are now going to be working more and more remotely. My vision is to see, okay, now that we are going to be working remotely and a lot of people are going to be working from home, a lot of people are going to be starting up new businesses because a lot of people are losing jobs. They're going to need some sort of, not only a support group, but they need the network and a place to co-work with each other online. And what I'm trying to build is that space, that third space between home and the office that lives digitally. It's kind of like a WeWork, kind of like a co-working space in the middle where people are working with each other, but it's also like a LinkedIn. So you're able to have that conversations. Currently, what I've launched last week is this thing called Lunch Together, where you can have virtual lunches with like-minded founders, freelancers, etc. You just kind of hop on a Zoom call. So we had people from China, people from Morocco, Netherlands, US, Idaho, like all over the world, right? And what if this was more frequent? And because it's kind of like chat roulette. Are you familiar with chat roulette?
Yeah, kind of, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, it's like the verified version of it, right? So you don't have any things that you don't want to see, so to speak, right? So
yeah, I mean, I never got involved in it, but I know people who did.
Same.
So,
yeah. And so because we need that spontaneity, and if everyone's stuck at home, how do you build your network?
Yeah.
Right. So what if you can kind of have stuff like this where you can connect with each other? And that's the vision of where I want to take it.
How do you manage all these projects that you're doing? And how do you manage all the different steps that you're taking to do this? I mean, what tools do you use yourself in your business?
It's a bit spread out, right? I think it kind of goes back to having a philosophy and a systematic approach rather than the tools, right? There's the old adage of Stephen King, who whenever he goes to some conferences, someone will inevitably ask him, "Hey, Stephen King, what pen do you use?" Right? Like, it doesn't really matter what pen he uses, right? Because it's all about the mindset and how you approach. So personally for me, like in terms of tools, I use Google Sheets, I use Asana as a PM tool, but it's also the methodology and mindset, right? Like I approach at the beginning of the week, I look at, okay, I have a set of questions that I ask myself, right? Like, if I accomplished everything I wanted to in the quarter in 1 week, what would that look like? Right, it completely changes your perception and of what could be accomplished, but also how can you accomplish your goals in a short amount of time. So that's one. And I have like a whole bunch of questions, and then looking at, okay, here's the week, here's my goals, here's what I need to accomplish. What is the highest priority items? 5. right? And then what's a medium and what is a nice to have that if I get a chance to do that, and then focus on the priority until that gets finished and then move on to something else. So that's my systematic approach of how I kind of look at both the large and the small tactical tasks.
So do you answer these questions yourself, like in Google Sheets, or do you just, is this just something you sit down and think about and or do you keep a list of those questions and answers?
Yeah, it's both. It's both. I have a list of questions. Like I find questions is a powerful way of not only self-reflection, but also strategy. For example, one of the great questions, you might have heard this from Jeff Bezos, is that ask yourself what's not going to change in 20 years, right? Because that's what he asked himself before he created, or as he was building Amazon. What ends up happening is a lot of people think about, oh, this is going to change, this is going to change, so I'm going to build on that. But then if you ask what's not going to change in 20 years, Jeff Bezos determined it was more options in terms of shopping options and faster speed. So that's why he's able to kind of build and focus on it for 10 years at a time. So like for me, I find these questions very powerfully reflective, and it helps you shape your strategy. So actually built a site specifically for this questions that anyone can access. It's just called Socrat, shortened of Socrates. So you can kind of decide, you can kind of select questions that are like, if you want to do strategy, if you want to do marketing, etc., just select on those and you'll see the top rated questions that anyone can kind of access.
If you're looking to be part of a group of fellow entrepreneurs that want to improve their project management skills, check out the Biker PM Facebook group. I'll be active in the group helping out entrepreneurs with their project management questions. There's going to be a link in the information of this podcast. And don't forget to please rate and comment on what you're listening to. It is a very thought-provoking question, is what's not going to change in the next 20 years? Because there is a lot that does change, but there is a lot that doesn't. For instance, if you look at Amazon, people are not going to stop shopping. That's not going to change. But how that changes, how people change their shopping habits could affect the different projects you undertake or how you change your business going over the next 20 years, and understanding your demographics.
100%.
You sound like you've always wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It sounds like from the beginning, but what inspired that spark in you? What do you think was something that happened that was like, I need to be my own boss. I don't want to do the 9 to 5.
I feel like freedom being one, because you kind of have the freedom, but I feel like it's kind of a misnomer when you say that you don't want to be your own boss when you want to start a business. Ultimately, everyone has a boss, right? Yeah. If you are working by yourself, if you're a freelancer, your bosses are your clients, right? Exactly. So for me, I just enjoyed the freedom of not kind of having the standard 9 to 5. And yes, it's going to be like highs and lows, but I enjoy just being curious and following that curiosity. So when I started my first business, excluding, when I'm in high school and I'm, kind of just selling stuff to friends, I would say it's really like, hey, we just want to work for ourselves and we just want to do something that we enjoy the freedom of. So that's what really started the initial kick. But these days, if I were to kind of do it again, I would ask a different question entirely as I'd go about it. I think it's funny because I had an interview the other day and we had the same conversation about, I didn't want to do the 9 to 5. I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to, do my own thing. And then you realize as an entrepreneur that, 9 to 5 is a lot less work than being you're self-employed and being an entrepreneur. You're lucky if it's 9 to 9 some days. Like tonight, I teach college too. So and we switched to online. So now I'm teaching college via WebEx starting at 7 p.m. tonight. So, my today is probably a 13, 14-hour day. And that happens. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people go into entrepreneurship not realizing that happens. Yeah, 100%. And I think the other thing is people just want to make money. Like that's the other thing. But in reality, if you want to make money, you could go into hedge fund, just make the money if that's what you're really trying to do. I think if you're trying to decide on starting a business, there needs to be a question you need to answer. It's like, what problem am I solving? And from there, how is it not being addressed currently? Because
And how can you be of service
exactly,
to those people?
exactly. Because once you kind of address that, then you can look at, okay, look, there is no one else doing this. There's a huge opportunity. That's when I'm going to create a product. Instead of what a lot of people do is, hey, I have this idea. Let me push it out into the market, into the world. But then you realize people don't want it. Whereas if you do it the other way, if you look at what the problem is, then you have unlimited amount of solutions that you can offer to them.
So if we go back to what inspired you to be an entrepreneur and you've always wanted to be, are there any certain resources, something that you've really enjoyed that's helped you along the way and kept you motivated?
As of late, in the past 2-3 years, yes. In terms of motivation, so the motivation, Zig Ziglar, he actually says, who's one of the fathers of motivational, he often says the motivation is like taking a shower.
Every time I hear him, he sounds like, he should be up behind a pulpit.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So he actually says motivation, listen to motivational talks is like taking a shower. It's nice, but it doesn't last long. So a lot of people think like, hey, I'm just going to listen to one motivational talk and I'm good for the rest of the year. That often isn't the case, right? You just need to constantly, just like how you need to constantly go to the gym and work out, you need to constantly improve, watch for your mindset. Because when things start to go in your mindset, when you're thinking you're great to when you're okay to when you're sucky or when you're bad, it's a very thin line. And we don't catch ourselves in our mind when we do it. So the best thing to do is to kind of, well, we always say like you're an average of the 5 people you surround yourself with, but it's also what are you listening to, what's going in your mind. That's the one thing that helps me keeps me motivated, and also just being curious, because once you're just naturally curious or surrounding yourself with others, you're able to kind of listen and figure out more solutions to your problems and perhaps serve your customers better.
So what do you listen to? What kind of things do you listen to keep you motivated?
Yeah, so I listen to, like, I mean, I can pull up my audiobook right here. I have a Zig Ziglar's tapes on Audible. Let's see, what else do I have? I listen to a few different podcasts, whether it's tech-based or just business-based.
What's your favorite podcast? I'm going to throw you on the spot.
Yeah, like, like the biker, someone has like a biker PM podcast. I don't know who they I like, so it kind of goes in and out. I kind of like Tim Ferriss's podcast. Shane Parrish, The Farnham Street is a good one as well.
Okay.
Malcolm Gladwell, Revisionist History, that's also a good one as well. And Seth Godin. So here are like a few good ones.
Have you ever listened to Entrepreneurs on Fire?
I think I listened to one episode of it. Yes.
It's one of my favorites. John Lee Dumas. Yeah, that was the podcast that got me into podcasting.
Wonderful.
So it's a lot of good episodes on there. And then I also listened to one called Starting from Zero or something like that. It's a new one that's out.
Okay.
But yeah, and then I listened to some PM podcasts as well.
What's your favorite podcast episode? Like ever? If you had to pick like top 1 or 2.
Episode or?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's funny because I have very few that I've actually saved to my phone. I listen to them. I have to put my glasses on. So, I mean, I have very few that I've saved to my phone and downloaded episodes. There's one that's it's actually an Entrepreneurs on Fire one that I saved. One from March 2nd is like how systemization can save your business. And it talks about how to have systems in place in your business, which makes a lot of sense. And it's one that I listened to recently that I saved because I really enjoyed it. But I've got a few, and then there's a couple that I've saved from a podcast called Strange on Purpose, company that's out of Milwaukee. I actually interviewed one of the owners and one of the podcasters on my podcast last year. But it's an interesting podcast, and talking to entrepreneurs, and they ask the same question to all their guests: what makes you strange on purpose? So it's kind of how are you different? So it's kind of an interesting one.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, like two of my favorite. One is with Naval Ravikant, who's I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's the founder of AngelList, and it was with him on the either Tim Ferriss or the Farnham Street Knowledge podcast, and this because he was talking about wealth creation, and the second one was with Derek Sivers, and that was a fantastic one as well on Tim Ferriss show.
Starting from Zero. Start from Zero. That's the other podcast that I was talking about, the new one. I don't know if I got the name correct or not, but there's some really good ones on that, because it's a coach that goes on and coaches people with their ideas, and he's recording them into a podcast and talks them through the whole process of taking their idea from nothing and finding out what they need to do to actually increase either the revenue or actually be able to actually go through and start whatever they're wanting to start. It's interesting because they talk a lot about getting away from what the mechanism is of how you're going to deliver what you're going to deliver. And because too many people try to focus on that. To get back to you, what piece of advice would you have for entrepreneurs that are wanting to start out or looking to start a business?
Yeah, it was something. It's a question that I got asked quite a few times. I think it's going back to understanding what problem are you solving. Don't come up with the idea. Don't come up with this brand new invention. Like, trying to understand what problem are you solving. People are always gonna have problems, and the problems are gonna change. As you try and figure out what are the problems, then you can kind of figure out, okay, here is my solution for it. So if someone is messy, or if someone's organization is messy, you can implement PM strategies to help improve their processes, right? That is a problem you're solving. So I think when you start off with what problem am I solving, that is the first thing you want to be aware of when you're starting a business.
Before we close this out, because it's been a great conversation, I think the business that you have, especially in today's environment with what's going on, like we were talking about, with lots of people working from home that don't normally work from home, or that are more secluded because of it. How can people find out more about your company and what its goals are?
The most simplest way is just head to council.club or council.club, or you could just ping me on Twitter, Instagram, whatnot, at It's Najeeb, and just say you're here from the Biker PM show. And that's the easiest way to at least kind of get a quick overview of Council Club. All the info is on the website, or you can just ping me with a question.
Perfect. And they can find you on Twitter, on Instagram, and
LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok even. Okay. Starting to be a bit more active there. So yeah,
there's so many to be active on.
Yeah. So, or it's just if you just go to najeebkhan.com, that's where you should see like my basic stuff, or even my book. But yeah.
So tell us about your book. What book is this?
Yeah. So it's I know for those listening, they can't see it, but over here, it's a business innovation book. It's really taking a look at what is stay true in innovation, right? Because we've seen companies that are startups now to larger companies innovating, but if you go back in time, look at the Mongolian Empire. How have the largest empires innovated to grow? So this is really an exploration of taking a look at what is stay true of how to successfully innovate, but do it profitably. So that is what Fluid, the book, is about.
Awesome. And where can they get the book? Can they get it on? Is it on Amazon?
Amazon,
where everything else is, right?
Exactly.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I appreciate you being on today, Najeeb. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Biker PM. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you think. And remember, if you're an entrepreneur that wants to be with like-minded individuals and improving their project management skills, join the Biker PM Facebook group. Until next time.